Shit. It's episode 33. We're in lockdown again. God damn it. We're stuck down here in the basement. You know, there are still reasons for optimism and joy. There are always reasons for optimism and joy. Just go looking for them, people. Just go looking. I'll give you some helpful tips, okay? There is new music out from two of the artists that I admire the most. And they happen to be women. So, for example, Karen O, formerly of the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and just like an incredible artist, has teamed up with Willie Nelson to do that Bowie song, Under Pressure. What an unlikely coupling. What a strange pair. But it's just so wonderful and refreshing. You know, it's not like they're making any new crazy discoveries about the nature of music here. They're doing an old song and they're doing it straight. But it's great. Karen O is amazing. Valerie June. Valerie June has not put out any music for a couple of years now. And what I'm reading is that she's been spending a lot of time rallying the troops for the election down in the States. So she's been a little busy, okay? Cut her some slack. But, I mean, Valerie June is just one of my very favorite artists from the last 10 years. Just amazing. And she's put out a new EP. It's kind of a 2.5 song EP. It's called Stay. You can see it on the YouTube thing. And when I watched it, oh man, just hearing her voice again kind of gave me a lump in my throat. I'm a sensitive guy, you know. I'm sensitive, okay? Really. Don't push my buttons like that. It was just so great. And yeah, she's got that Memphis rhythm section rocking away, but it's kind of meditative music. Anyway, don't listen to me. Just go listen to it. Valerie June, she's killer. It's National Drummer Day, okay? And I could go on and on about how drummers have changed my life. I've been blessed with a bunch of just amazing drummers in my life. And, you know, I'll say one, okay? Tony Torture had changed my life. Really, you know, my life would have taken a different turn if things had turned out differently. So, and, you know, I could go on and on. You know, my brother, Alex, Don Kerr, Cleve Anderson, Jimmy Weatherston, amazing drummers. But let's talk about women here. Let's do a little woman-focused episode here. I think that's what we're going to do. So, there are some kick-ass women drummers out there. Like Cindy Blackman. I mean, she plays with Lenny Kravitz, but that's not really all she does. She is like this jazz legend who is like one of the greatest drummers in the world. Sheila E., Mo Tucker, Meg White, Honey Lantry from the Honeycombs. Remember her from back in the 60s? She had that band. And she was the leader of the band. She wrote the songs, and they put the drums kind of up front. She was the fucking leader of the band. It was a bunch of guys, a bunch of nerds. And they did, you know, that song, Have I the Right? That was groundbreaking stuff in the early 60s. Sandy West from the Runaways. You could go on and on. Kick-ass women drummers, okay? So, episode 33, you know, we've been talking about, you know, the anthology and a lot of murderous behavior. And, you know, since we are equal opportunity employers, I think it's time that we talked about a woman murderer. Okay? We're going to do the Frankie and Johnny story, all right? Hang on to your hats. Here we go.
Back in 1927, the great American poet and man of letters, Carl Sandburg, put together this big book of songs because he fashioned himself a bit of a ethnomusicologist, all right? So he put this gigantic book of songs, which he called the American Song Bag, and he gathered it was 500 pages long. It was huge, right? And he put together every folk song that he could find that he thought was American, and he put them in by different types of songs and by region. He had hobo songs, he had western songs, he had big city songs, he had Mexican border songs, railroad songs. He had a whole chapter of Frankie songs. So even back in 1927, there was like a bunch of songs that were identifiably Frankie and Johnny songs. So what the hell does that mean? You know, basically Sandburg said it's the America's classic gutter song, or it's a low-life grand opera. whatever that means. And basically, he's saying what you take away from this is life is a tragedy to those who feel and a comedy to those who think. I don't know, a bit highbrow. It's really a murder ballad, right? The names change all the time. Originally, it was Frankie and Albert, and then it became Frankie and Johnny, and then even Frankie became Sadie and Josie and blah, blah, blah. It was a continuously evolving thing, but it was the same story. So, I mean, there's this guy who wrote a book about it, and he says everybody that knows anything at all about Frankie and Johnny is likely to have a version of his own. Okay, and there's nothing so rabid for righteousness, so bristling with self-defense as a dyed-in-the-wool Frankie and Johnny fan. That's 1927. People are getting all uppity about Frankie and Johnny in 1927. Okay, so what's the general concept? You probably know the general concept. I mean, this thing is saturated popular culture, but here I'll just summarize for you. Okay, so Frankie is a lady, and Johnny, or Albert, is her boyfriend. And she loves him, and she takes care of him. She buys him $100 suit of clothes, which is a big deal, even today, for God's sakes. And he's a bit of a gambler. He's a ne'er-do-well. He's a sport, okay? I guess means he's kind of a pimp or something. Anyway, she catches him fooling around with this other girl, this girl who has many names. Alice or Nellie and so on. But anyway, she catches him, fucking around with another girl, and after harsh words ensue, and basically she shoots him. She shoots him dead. And from that point on, the story takes various turns. Sometimes she's thrown in jail and executed, hung, electrocuted, killed in all sorts of nasty ways. And in other versions, she just gets away with it. And it's all okie dokie because it was justified. So there's over 300 versions of this song. I mean, I didn't count them. Somebody counted them, okay? So it goes way back, way, way, way back to the early 1900s, maybe even before. So Mississippi John Hurt did the classic version, which is on the Harry Smith anthology. Leadbelly did a great version, and it's different than Mississippi John Hurt's. Louis Armstrong did a version, which is kind of in the tradition of the older ragtime version of it. Duke Ellington did a version. Sam Cooke, Elvis, for God's sake, Johnny Cash. I'll tell you what's cool is if you look on the that movie they did about the Harry Smith project where they got like Nick Cave and Lou Reed and other people to do a song. Beth Orton does a killer version of the Frankie and Johnny song. So that just kind of pulls all the last couple episodes together a little bit. Hey, Beth Orton, you should check that out. She does a killer version of Frankie and Johnny. So this song, it just like goes nuts. Hollywood, not only did people record it, but Hollywood loved it. Mae West did a version, did a Frankie and Johnny movie back in the 30s. I think she did more than one, for God's sakes. Elvis did a wretched Frankie and Johnny movie. His co-star was Donna Douglas, who's Ellie Mae Clampett. So need I say more? Okay, Al Pacino did a version, much more recently. So Hollywood just loves a song about a woman wronged killing her man. Who doesn't love that, for God's sakes, So I guess if we go back, way, way, way back, it seems like, this song has some historical basis. It seems like it's pretty much from the same time and place, more or less, as Stagger Lee. So what we need is the facts. Can somebody just give me the facts? I gotta quit smoking. All right, just the facts. Just the facts here. From the St. Louis Globe Democrat, October 16th, 1899. There was this story run. Alan Britt, colored, was shot and badly wounded shortly after 2 a.m. yesterday morning by Frankie Baker, also colored. The shooting occurred in Baker's room at 212 Targhee Street. It was the culmination of a quarrel. The woman claimed that Britt had been paying attention to another woman. The bullet entered Britt's abdomen, penetrating his intestines. The woman escaped. after the shooting. Seems pretty straightforward. Alan Britt was a 17-year-old talented ragtime piano player in St. Louis in 1899. He was a sporting man. He was a snappy dresser. He was playing the Phoenix Hotel at a cakewalk, which is a bit of a rowdy body dance party, on October 15th. Frankie Baker went down to the Phoenix Hotel to see him play. And she caught him messing around in the hallway with an 18-year-old prostitute, Alice Pryor. You can well imagine how that went down. They started quarreling. Frankie begged Alan to come home with her, but he refused, so she went home herself. Seems like Alan probably went home with Alice, but he came back to Frankie's place about 3 in the morning, 2 or 3 in the morning, and the quarrel continued. Apparently Frankie and Alan got into it, and Alan pulled a knife. Frankie, as it happens, had a loaded pistol under her pillow, as one does. And she pulled it out, and she shot him. Shot him once. So Alan was taken to the hospital. Frankie was arrested. She went down to the Four Courts, same place they took Stagger Lee when he committed his murder. Terrible place, okay? The police took her to the hospital. Alan identified her as the shooter. Took a couple days for Alan to die, but he did pass away. So that's the story. A couple years later, in the late 1920s, the future film director John Huston was researching this story because he was writing a play called Frankie and Johnny. And he managed to get in touch with a guy, Richard Clay, who was Alan Britt's best friend and who was there when Alan met Frankie, and he was there at Alan's bedside when Alan died. You know, John Huston, Maltese Falcon, Key Largo, African Queen, Night of the Iguana. But in those days, he was just a little schmo, and he was trying to write this play to make his name in the world. So he got some facts from this Richard Clay guy. Richard Clay described Frankie. He said she was a beautiful light brown girl who liked to make money and to spend it. She dressed richly, sat for company in magenta ladies' cloth, diamonds as big as hens' eggs in her ears. That's got to be heavy. There's a long razor scar down the side of her face she got in her teens from a girl they had a fight over a guy. She weighed about 115 pounds, but she had the eye of one you couldn't monkey with. She was a queen sport. Frankie was well known around Targhee Street and in that area of St. Louis, that sporting area of St. Louis. Yep, she was a good-looking gal. Frankie loved Albert. This is what this Richard Clay says. Yeah. He was wise for his years. She was older than him. She was 24. He was 17. He was old for his years, but not old enough to be level with any woman. So Frankie gave him money. Frankie bought him everything he wanted. She kept his pockets full. And while he was out playing his gigs, he'd be fooling around on her. So, you know, at the Phoenix Hotel, Alan Clay says, he saw Frankie and Johnny, Frankie and Alan get into this fight. And, Alan refused to go home with Frankie, so she went back home. Alan did spend the night with Alice. So when Frankie was basically saying she was going to go out and find this Alice and take care of him for good, take care of her for good. So Frankie started crying. Alan shows up at her door. Alan says, "I'll kill you if you take another step. You know, don't go looking for Alice. Just stay right where you are." So that's kind of Alan's version. Frankie has a slightly different version that she's got. She says, Alan was at the party with Alice on the Saturday night, but she didn't let it bother her. She was wise to his ways. She went home, went to bed. She says about 3 o'clock Sunday morning, Alan came in, and she says, I was in bed asleep. He walked in, grabbed a lamp and threw it at her, and he was cussing at her, and she's going, hey man, you trying to hurt me? And she said, I'm the boss here. I pay the bills. Back off. He ran his hand into his pocket, pulled out a knife. She reached under her pillow, got out her gun, shot him once. Boom. So that's the story of Frankie and Johnny. So, strangely enough, it seems even before Frankie was dead, this guy, Bill or Jim Dooley, a local songwriter in New Orleans, ragtime songwriter, had already put together the song of Frankie and Alan. So Alan Britt, didn't take long for that song to become Frankie and Albert, because that's easier to say. Then at some point, it seems possibly Frankie's parents, who lived on Targhee Street there and rented the room to these two, kind of complained. Maybe they went to court and they said, we don't want our son's name associated with this tawdry mess. So eventually the song became Frankie and Johnny. It was actually easier to say. Now as for Alice Pryor, she shows up in the song too quite a bit. So that's kind of hard to say. So pretty soon it became Alice Fry. You see a lot of the songs called where they say the other girl is Alice Fry. And then, before you know it, it becomes Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly. Why do I know that name? This could be a detour. All right, Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly is a real person. Nellie Bly has nothing really to do with the Frankie and Johnny story. It's just bad luck for her that the other woman, whose name actually was Alex Pryor, and then Alice Pryor became Alice Fry because that was a little easier to rhyme, and then Alice Fry eventually became Nellie Bly because that just rolls off the tongue and it fits good in the song. Okay, but in 1900, anybody would have known who the real Nellie Bly was. Nellie Bly was just an astounding, amazing woman. This has nothing to do with folk music, but it's so amazing that we have to take a little detour, okay? So, here, in this young lady, Elizabeth Cochran, was born in 1864, one of like 15 kids, and as a teenager, she wants to go to school, but they can't afford it, so she has to drop out. But obviously she has aspirations. So in Pittsburgh, in the local paper, the Pittsburgh Dispatch at that time, some wag writes a story called What Girls Are Good For. And the theme of this little screed is that girls are not good for much. So basically they're saying girls are good for having babies and cleaning house. So Elizabeth Cochran, she's still a teenager, but she doesn't like the tone of this article. So she writes a letter to the editor disputing its premise. And she signs it as Lonely Orphan Girl. Well, the editor is so taken with this letter, it's well written, it's to the point, it's controversial, that they put an ad in the paper. They say, oh, little lonely orphan girl, please come forward, identify yourself, we want to give you a job. So she does, and they do. So here she is, she's 19 or 20, and she's got a job at the Pittsburgh Dispatch. And I'll tell you, in that era, not a lot of girls had a job at the Pittsburgh Dispatch or any other paper. So she immediately just jumps into the deep end of the pool. Her first dispatch is called The Girl Puzzle. And it is a little story about, not a story, but a report on the effects of divorce on families, on children, on women. It's a little controversial. So that one was published under her moniker Lonely Orphan Girl. But by that time, the editor is going, you're a keeper, so we got to give you a real name. So I'm going to call you Nellie Bly. And she's going, well, call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late for dinner. So away she goes, and she continues these controversial articles that she's writing. She writes about the condition of women in factories in Pittsburgh, and this really pisses off the capitalists there in Pittsburgh. They get in touch with the paper, and they say, knock it the fuck off. You're pissing us off. And they do. And they put Nellie back over into the women's column, where they write about, doilies and cookies and stuff like that. So Nellie is not happy over in the woman's column. So she talks her way into a job at Joseph Pulitzer's paper in New York City. And he hires her on, Nellie Bly, and immediately she travels to Mexico as a foreign correspondent. So she's a foreign correspondent in Mexico, and she's like writing all these exposés about how rotten the dictatorship is down there. And they have to scoot her back into the States pretty quick because she's about to be murdered. I mean, this is pretty racy stuff. She's only 21 years old, and she really doesn't have any formal education. Next thing she does, she writes an exposé about the conditions in the insane asylum in New York City. So she gets herself committed. Okay, so she puts herself in, hires a room in a flop house and proceeds to start acting crazy. And she got herself committed. So they put her into the nut house there, and she was in there for 10 days. And it was pretty fucking appalling. And finally, after the 10th day, the newspaper gets her out. And she writes these series of articles in the paper called 10 Days in a Madhouse. And it is just so frickin' awful about what's going on in there. They're beating people. They're putting them in ice cold baths. There's all sorts of terrible behavior going on. And it upsets people so much that it actually causes a change in the policy of the madhouse there. Next thing she does, she's read this book a famous book by Jules Verne called Around the World in 80 Days. And she pitches this to her editor and says, well, I can go around the world too. And she shows up the next day. A couple days later, she's got this big overcoat that's kind of her trademark. She's got a couple changes of underwear in a little bag, and she's got some money in a sack. And she gets on a steamer, and she starts going around the world. She actually meets Jules Verne in France, who is so taken with her. He loves her and says all sorts of nice things about her. She keeps going. This is all by steamer and train. She goes around the world on her own, okay? She visits a leper colony in China. She buys a monkey in Singapore. Who does she think she's Michael Jackson or Justin Bieber? One of those. I don't know. Who are those monkey guys? Anyway, she's monkeying around there, and she makes it back. Apparently, some other newspaper actually hired another lady to go around the world the other way, but Nellie didn't know about this until halfway, and when she found out, she went, fuck yeah. So, anyway, Nellie won. Nellie made it around the world in just over 72 days. She arrived back in New Jersey to cheers and accolades, and she publishes all these stories about what's going on out there in the world. It was a world record. She set the world record for going around the world. She got involved in exposing the human trafficking trade in New York. She wrote a little article where she started off, I bought a baby last week. To learn just how baby slaves are bought and sold in New York City. Think of it, an immortal soul bartered for $10. So I bought an immortal soul last week for $10. So, of course, this caused a big hubbub, and they were clamping down on these people who were selling babies. Later on, she marries a millionaire, as one does, and basically this guy, he's in charge of a big manufacturing outfit called Ironclad Manufacturing. He gets sick, dies. She takes over. So she is the most powerful industrial magnate, probably female in the world at the time. She's too nice though, so it gets run into the ground. But in the meantime, she's still inventing things. She's just just like this powerhouse, this woman with so much power and inspiration that we just had to take a little detour. So one other thing that's kind of funny. You know how Google does those little doodles? In 2015, they did a Nellie Bly doodle. And you know who did the music for it? Wait for it. Karen O did the music for it. It's all coming together, people. It's all coming together. All the little strings are coming together. All right, that's the end of this detour. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. All right, so that was Nellie Bly. Back to Frankie. So, literally within a day of the shooting, this guy Bill Dooley had written a song, the Frankie and Alan song. And, he may have taken parts of older songs and just kind of knit them together, and that's what folk music is. Nothing wrong with that. But basically, from that day on, even while Alan was still alive, the song had already been created. And it just went like wildfire from there. So people were singing it all over. And basically, within a few months, Frankie basically heard people singing this song about her. And it was a little uncomfortable. She didn't like it at all. So within a year after the murder, she took off. She left St. Louis and she went to Omaha, Nebraska, and because she found it humiliating that these songs were, about her being a murderer, when really, when this went to trial, it was thrown out because she got off on self-defense. The judge believed her that Frankie was acting in self-defense because Alan came in with a knife and was threatening her, threw a lamp at her. It was just lucky she had a pistol under her pillow. So she didn't do any jail time for this. Nevertheless, the song goes on, and the song is, it morphs into all sorts of other things. In a lot of these songs, she ends up being convicted and hung and electrocuted and all sorts of terrible things. But, of course, she wasn't. So she was in Nebraska, for God's sakes. Then finally she moves to Portland, Oregon. She worked as a prostitute there for a while, and then eventually she opens up a little shoe shine shop. So in 1935, the movie She Done Him Wrong, starring Mae West and Cary Grant, comes out, and it's all about the Frankie and Johnny story. So people start coming up to Frankie's door and, asking for, to talk to her and autographs and gawking. And it's humiliating all over again. So she sues Hollywood for $200,000 and fails. So later on, another Frankie and Johnny movie come out with Helen Morgan, and she sues them again and fails again. Basically, all the jurors are white. All of the defense lawyers are white. The judge is white. All of the Frankie's people are black. And the movie is all white people. Mae West has basically taken this energy from this song, which is originally, a black song, and, converted it to her own purposes, which is kind of her own sexual revolution, I guess, if you want. So it failed. So Frankie's lawsuits against Hollywood all fail. And she just goes back home. Eventually, Frankie kind of loses her mind, and she dies in an insane asylum. So that's kind of the sad story of Frankie. But the songs go on. So the Mississippi John Hurt version, Segovia, the great guitar player and composer from Europe, heard John Hurt's version of it, and he thought it was the most amazing thing. He thought there was like more than one guitar being played there, but there's not. So this is actually a pretty cool Mississippi John Hurt song. And here's how it goes. Let's be good. Frankie was a good girl, everybody knows. Paid $100 for Albert's suit of clothes. He's a man, and he done her wrong. Frankie went down to the corner saloon, didn't go to be there long. Peaked 3 the side. Judge says to Frankie, you're gonna be justified for killing a man, and he done you wrong. Dark was the night, cold was the ground. That's what I heard Frankie said. I done laid Albert down. He's my man, and he done me wrong. Ain't gonna tell you no story, ain't gonna tell you no lie. Albert passed about an hour ago with a girl named Alice Fry. He's your man.